Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you don't know who I am, my name is Eddy. I lost over 125 pounds and I've kept that weight off now for over 22 years. I've been talking a lot about identity. And in this channel, we talk about weight loss. We don't talk about challenges or anything. I'm the anti-challenge guy. I'm all about sustainable weight loss that's gonna help you lose weight now and keep it off for a lifetime, just like I did, right? For the last 20 something years. Today, I wanna talk about something that kind of ties into identity. So in the last few videos, I've really kind of shifted and focused a little more toward identity and telling you that if you want to lose weight, you have to become this new person. And there's a whole, array of things that you're going to realize that happen when you become this new person. You don't know what you're going to be like and the opportunities that you're going to open up for yourself when you lose that 15, 20, 30, 50 pounds, whatever it is that you have to lose. And so today I want to talk about some of the things that pull you back in and pull you back toward that old identity. And the number one thing that I want to talk about is how stress typically has a way of pulling you back into your old identity. And we're going to talk about why that happens. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to build systems and an environment to protect yourself from that stress and from falling back into old habits so that you can not only lose weight, but keep it off for the long run. So like I said, I've been speaking a lot about identity, and I think that's because identity is the foundation of any kind of change you want to make in your life, whether it's financial, whether it's health-wise, relationship-wise. You have to look inside and listen to who you are and who you want to become, and you have to start to shift, and you have to build that bridge from where you are now to where you want to be in the future. And one of the things that always kind of pulls us back is stress. So what is the biology of stress? What's exactly happening in our bodies that's really forcing us to kind of go back to who we used to be? Right? And I want to talk a little bit about some research. You guys know me. I like to kind of pull little tidbits of research to kind of show you that I'm not just making this stuff up. A lot of what I talk about is based off of my own experience, but I like to back it up with research so you know that it's not just me saying that based off of my experience, because everyone is a little different. Now, cortisol is what we call the stress hormone. That is going to get elevated when you have stress, whether it's stress from work, whether it's you have a deadline coming up. These days, we don't have stress from being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. That's what it was originally meant for. This cortisol response is meant to kind of activate your fight or flight response. So either you're going to fight or you're going to run to save your life, right? Your life is in threat. Now, we don't have that threat in modern society, but what we do have is the threat of losing your job, the threat of your relationship if you have arguments with your significant other or anybody in your family, friends, all of these different kind of society-driven problems that we face every day, they cause stress. And so we have to learn and we have to understand that we have to have an environment and systems in place to protect against that stress, because if not, what's going to happen is it's going to hijack your biology and you're going to go back to who you used to be, and you're going to kind of not be able to make progress toward that new identity. So cortisol, this stress hormone, is going to increase, right? It's going to increase in situations where you're high stress. And what happens is under stress, the brain is going to go back to its default way of doing things. So if you think about starting to change your identity, that requires work, that requires new behaviors, that requires doing new habits and new things and incorporating these new things that you're not used to. Think about, for example, driving to a new place. Let's say you started a new job and you're driving to a new office and it's your first time or second time driving there. You kind of have to use a GPS, or you have to pay extra attention to where you're going and how you're driving and which streets you're going to take. Why? Because you haven't been there before. So your brain is kind of doing this for the first time. It needs a little more attention to do that. It requires more energy to do that. Now, if I'm going to the same job that I've had for a year or 2 or 5 years or 10 years, then it's almost like you forget how you get there sometimes, because you just drive and you feel like you get in your car, you start doing other stuff and you're driving, but your brain is already used to doing that. It's a routine. It's already a habit. And so it requires very little energy for your brain to process that activity and to execute on that activity because you've done it a million times. And the same thing happens with your old identity versus your new identity. When you're trying to shift to a new identity, that requires more effort from your brain and from all of you to try to incorporate these habits. And that's why starting slow and building some consistency is the best way and the recommended approach that I always tell people to do. Okay. Now, what happens when you have stress? When you have stress, the brain is like, oh, I have a choice between doing this new activity and this new habit, which requires more energy, Or I can just default back into my regular way of being, which is my old identity, and that's more comfortable, and I don't have to use a lot of energy to do that. And so what happens is you end up falling back into your old habits, and you end up falling back into this old identity, and you lose progress on getting to the new identity. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of that example. Your brain's using a lot of energy to try to change you from the inside out, and it's worth it, I can promise you. However, you need to understand that when stress hits, your brain's gonna automatically wanna get back to that old way of doing things because it's comfortable and it doesn't have to use a lot of energy for you to do those old things because you've been doing it for a long time. In many cases with the people I work with and coach, they've been doing it for 30, 40, 50 years. So your habits and your behaviors are already set. Your brain, it's like your default. It's kind of who you are. It's your identity. You're trying to change that. You have to understand that stress is gonna be hard in terms of getting in the way of you changing that. And so that leads me into the next point, which is why willpower is something that you just cannot depend on willpower. Willpower is not enough. And so I talk to so many of my clients that have situations where they say, I had a bad week because we were at work and my colleagues wanted to go get lunch out. And I was in a situation where, first of all, I couldn't really track. If someone is tracking, I couldn't really track the calories because we're at a restaurant and it's harder to track. And second of all, they went to a place that didn't have a lot of healthy food. Or I have a client event and they ordered a bunch of food for the big group and I didn't have a choice of what to order. So I just had to eat what was there, right? And so what happens is you have to then rely on willpower. And willpower is, it's a bad kind of insurance plan. Like you're not going to win. Willpower will win every time, especially if it's later in the day when you've depleted your willpower. If you do it first thing in the morning, you'll notice that you have a lot more say in kind of what you do and how you do it. But as you get throughout the day, your willpower goes lower and lower and lower with all the activities you've done throughout the day. And next thing you know, your subconscious is making decisions. You think it's you making decisions, but really it's just your old identity and your natural way of doing things get in the way of you making progress. So that's why willpower is kind of a losing battle. You're not going to win against willpower. So what do you do instead of relying on willpower, right? And that's when I get into this third part of my video, which is you need to set up systems. There's 4 different key things that I want to touch on when it comes to systems, but you need to develop systems in order to protect you when you do have that stressful thing come up, because we're all going to have stress come up, whether it's at home or at work or on the way to work or back from work, anywhere in life, you're going to have stress. It's an absolute given. There's very, very few constants in life, but the number one constant is change, and humans don't like change. So change is going to cause stress. So when things get switched up on you, when you think you're going to go to one place, but you end up going to another place to eat and you don't know how to make a decision or you don't have any healthy options, you're going to get stressed, you're going to make a bad decision. So what we need to do is we need to put systems in place. And the first part of building a system is making sure that you have the environmental design right. And so when I was losing weight, I remember that I had identified some of the foods that I wanted to kind of stay away from, a lot of processed foods. So I threw out potato chips, I threw out cookies, I threw out ice cream, because I know that specifically for me, ice cream is one of those trigger foods where as soon as I start having it, I can't have just a spoon or two, I'm gonna eat the whole pint. So I got rid of that stuff in my design, and I created and I designed my environment the way that I wanted to have it so that it supported my goals. So for example, things like keeping protein-rich foods visible and accessible, right? Hiding any or removing, I don't recommend hiding because you know where you're gonna hide it, but removing any kind of junk foods or processed foods that you really don't need. Ask yourself, is this food serving me, right? And then the other thing is you have to also look at your environment from a people perspective. Like, who am I hanging out with? And I know this is a harsh reality, but if you're hanging out with a bunch of people that are unhealthy, you're gonna stay unhealthy. Or it's going to be really, really hard to become healthy and to shift into this new identity when you're hanging out with a bunch of people that identify with that old identity. You're going to feel out of place, and eventually you're going to feel like you need to find a new group to hang out with. So these are all things to think about. I'm not saying they're easy, but things that you need to be aware of. The second thing is pre-commitment. And what I mean by that is thinking ahead, having awareness in terms of, if I know that I'm going to have a client dinner, then what I just recommended on a conversation yesterday with the client was, she said, I'm gonna have a client dinner, and I know that they're gonna order the same example I mentioned before. They're gonna order a bunch of food because it's like 10 or 15 people. I'm not gonna be able to order what I want specifically from the menu, so it's gonna be a bunch of unhealthy fried foods probably, because it's one of those like putt-putt golfing events. So what do? I told her, have some protein before you go to that event so that you're a little full, and make sure you're hydrated because you're probably gonna have a little alcohol you're gonna enjoy with coworkers and so forth. What is that right there? What that's doing is that's pre-commitment. You're pre-committing to saying, you know what? Fine, I'm gonna be in a situation where the environment's not gonna be great. However, I'm gonna control the things that I can control. And what I can control is I'm not gonna show up ravenously hungry. I'm gonna have some protein before, and I'm gonna make sure I stay hydrated because I know I'm gonna have some alcohol. And all of that stuff is gonna help me to make a better decision when I do have to make a choice between the least of all evils on the table, right? Is this fried food better than that one, or is this better than that? You're gonna be able to make a better decision if you're a little more full and if you're hydrated. So that's just, science proves that that's gonna help you make a better decision. The other thing you can do with pre-commitments is when you have workouts, put them in your calendar and don't make them optional. That's just an appointment, just as important as any other work call or family call or a family event, whatever. Just put it in your calendar and commit to it. Plan it ahead of time. And when you plan it, make sure that you are aware of any kind of things that can get in the way of that. So don't be the lazy person that says, I'm going to plan this Tuesdays and Thursdays, knowing that sometimes your manager wants to have a meeting after work, or you have a happy hour and you can't make it to that workout half the time. Think ahead on the obstacles that can potentially get in the way, and plan ahead so that those things aren't moved. And those are commitments that are not optional. You're committed to going and doing your walk or doing your workout or whatever it is that you're doing to stay healthy and to keep movement in your life. Make sure that those are commitments that you stick to. They're not optional. The next thing that I want you to think about in terms of your systems that you can build is you have to have ways to relieve and reduce stress, because stress is going to come, like I said. So if stress is going to be an automatic thing in your life, then you might as well find ways to be able to better deal with it. And I learned this a long time ago with my dad. My dad has had mental health issues for a very long time. It's been a very, very challenging, almost 20 years now dealing with this, back since 2008. And I knew a long time ago that either I was going to get better at managing the stress, or it's just going to be too much for me, right? And then that's a bad ending in itself. So I had to get better at managing stress because the stress wasn't going to go away. It might have been a little less or a little more at times, but it was very up and down. And so that stress was going to be in my life. I might as well just get better at handling it and finding ways to deal with that stress in a more effective way so that I can be the best version of myself. And so what does that mean? 5-minute walk after work or a 10-minute walk after work. If you like journaling, if you like writing, journaling is supposed to be something that's really, really good for stress. Before you go to bed, write down your thoughts in a notebook. I have this notebook that I love writing things in the morning, and I write a lot of gratitude and stuff in here. Like, write gratitude, and then also at night, if you write some stuff down, then I know it sounds weird, but it's not going to be up here. You're not going to be thinking about it because you physically wrote it down. So you're going to have a clearer mind, and you're going to be able to get better sleep. Better sleep makes everything better. It really does make everything better. The other thing you can do is other things like, instead of going and getting a snack because you're emotionally hungry, you're not really hungry, you're just kind of stressed and you're stress eating, have a glass of water, wait 10 or 15 minutes. I promise you that most of the time you're not going to be hungry. You were just probably thirsty, or you were about to eat something because you're stressed or you're emotional about something. And then the other thing you can do is some deep breathing. Just become more mindful. If you like meditation, I love meditation. It works great for me. I highly recommend it. But I also understand that meditation might not be great for everybody. If you like yoga, whatever it is that you like, go for a walk, do some deep breathing, close your eyes and just be present for a moment and just breathe. Give yourself that space. Give yourself that space because you're going to be a better person on the other end of that space. I can guarantee you. The last thing and the fourth thing that I want to talk about when it comes to building these systems is you have to kind of butter yourself up, and you have to kind of, tell yourself who it is that you are, who it is that you want to be. And so this can be in the form of just different notes or affirmations, reminders that reinforce you that you're this healthy, strong man, you're this healthy, strong woman. Like you're allowed to talk to yourself in a positive way. One of the biggest ways that I know when people aren't ready to change is when they talk to themselves in a negative way. When I hear someone that's overweight and they talk to themselves and they make jokes about their overweight situation, they make jokes about how they're fat, they make jokes about how clothes fits them. They almost kind of like make jokes about themselves, and that's their defense mechanism because they know that someone else is gonna probably think about it or say a joke. So they kind of get ahead of it, and that's their defense mechanism. So don't make fun of me, I'll make fun of myself. I got it taken care of. And this happens in people very, very close to me that I see sometimes, even family members. And I see this happen. And I remember when I was overweight thinking that and realizing like, I can't talk to myself in this way. Like if I'm ever going to change, I need to talk to myself in a different way, because if I don't believe in myself, then who's going to believe in me? No one else is. Everyone's worried about their own lives. So you have to realize that the way you talk to yourself is so incredibly important. So if you catch yourself saying things that reinforce that old identity, stop yourself, flip that around, and start to rewire your brain and tell yourself things that are positive. Talk about how you're healthy and how you're strong, how you're lean, even if you aren't there yet. Talk to yourself about how you're doing the things that healthy people do. You're doing the things that fit people do. And little by little, you'll start to rewire your brain and you'll start to create these new neural pathways that resonate more with the new identity and start to let go of that old identity. It's so incredibly important to be aware of the way that you talk to yourself. Do not talk to yourself in a negative way. It has much more of an impact on your subconscious than I could ever explain here in a video. There's a ton of videos and content about that on YouTube and anywhere else. But I can promise you that the way you talk to yourself is so incredibly important. And please talk to yourself in a positive way, whether it's affirmations, whether it's doing meditation and picturing yourself and visualizing. Make sure that what you're putting in here and what you're feeding yourself is positive. In addition to that, if you scroll on social media and if you watch news, make sure that you're feeding your brain just like you're feeding your mouth and your body. The good nutrition is going to give you good outcomes from a health perspective. Good information, good media. I don't know if good media exists, but positive things. Make sure that you're eliminating all of the negative things that you consume in terms of like your social media, news, whatever it is that you consume on YouTube, right? Make sure you're filling your cup up with positive, affirmations and positive information and positive content, because that's slowly and surely gonna eliminate the negative out of your life and elevate the positive. Look, the truth is that I lost over 125 pounds, 127 pounds in total. It took me about 6 months, and I could have easily slipped back at any point into that situation where, okay, like I'm gaining weight, but I never once slipped back. Why? Because I changed my identity. I made sure that I changed my identity and I decided who I was going to be, and I talked to myself in alignment with that new identity, and I made sure that every single day I lived in accordance to that new identity. And so when stress hits, rely on some of these systems that we talked about, but you have to understand that in order to get away from the old identity and go to that new identity, it's going to take some work. And there's going to be a lot of things working against you. And so you have to be prepared for those. And the way that you're prepared for those is by setting up systems. Systems are inputs and outputs. And if you can control the inputs, social media, the way you talk to yourself, the news you watch, the food you eat, the exercise you do, then guess what? You get good outcomes. You get good outputs, right? If you don't have control over the inputs, then you're going to get no control over the outputs. And so if you set up systems in place, you'll be great. Comment below. Tell me if this resonates with you. Share it with someone who maybe needs to see it, that you feel like needs to see this. And as always, I do limited coaching. So I am opening up a few spots here since we're in the beginning of September. And so if you're interested in that, click on the link below and we'll have a call, see if it's something that's a good fit for you. And if not, then I will see you on the next one. Like, subscribe, do all the good stuff, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.